Luther Nicolaescu awoke in the darkness of the night as his lungs suddenly filled with fresh air. The arrows in his back, which had been supposed to end his life, had been removed. He felt no pain from the wounds, which should be there. Stiff from the cold and hungry, he got up with a groan, for his weak limbs barely carried him. "Ah, you are awake," came a voice from the shadows. Luther didn't realize that he saw in the dark as well as at day, something that he couldn't do before. He looked around, still confused. He was supposed to be dead. The bodies of his friends, of his fellow townsmen, lay strewn around on the ground. With shock he realized that they were bloody and motionless. Their uprising had failed. The lord of their land had mercilessly mowed them down with arrow and sword. Who would plant the crops and feed the children now? "Oh Lord, they are all dead." "Not all." The voice about which the man had already forgotten sounded again. A rustle followed, and a man stepped into the moonlight. His eyes glowed red, and he dragged a body behind him. 2 or 3 of your people survived. They already feasted and went to their new home. The man smiled with arrogance as he threw the barely breathing man in front of Luther's feet. He knew the face. That man had been one of his people. Luther's hair stood up at the thought of drinking the blood of someone he still considered his own. He knew what he was supposed to do. There was a new and ancient instinct in his mind, an urge forcing him to feed. "No!" he exclaimed, shaking his head. He had led these people and failed them. He couldn't feast on them. He had a family waiting for him at home, and a community that needed to hear of his failure. The increased taxes would now be even more difficult to pay, with so many people dead and their work missing. Their families would be devastated. His heart grew heavy, and he suddenly lost his appetite. "You were almost dead. You need strength to fully recover." The other 2 were quicker in embracing their new life. "I don't want a new life. I want my old one. Oh, by God, I'll be dead." The vampire kneeled to lift the man up by the collar with one hand. "You have a new king now. God won't hear your pleas anymore, and you will drink." It wasn't an order, but a certain statement. It sent a shiver down Luther's spine. He was withstanding his instinct only with effort already now. "No," he uttered again, slightly weaker. "I'll die as a human." "He wants you, Luther. Your strength, your cunningness." The vampire studied Luther with anticipation as he slit open the man's throat. Luther could feel it burning in his veins. He needed blood. He wanted blood. He didn't care who that mortal had been to him. He was different now. Desperately he tried to turn away as he repeated the words in his head over and over. "I am human. I am human." The vampire came closer and grabbed Luther's neck with the other hand. The metallic smell of blood filled his nose. It only took a moment for him to lose the battle. Driven by the wildness inside, he sank his teeth into the dying man. He felt reborn, truly reborn. "That's how you do it," the vampire encouraged him. "Now you're one of us." But Luther wasn't one of them. He never became one of them. Deep inside, the idea of being human survived. Luther was running through the woods of Romania. He was running from many things. He had to fight his king and refuse to kill werewolves, whom he saw as more human than his own kind. They had come as nomads into the land, and when the vampires realized that they couldn't feast on them, they had decided to use them otherwise. But werewolves were free creatures. They wouldn't bow to a master. Just like he hadn't wanted to bow to the cruel horde subjugating his town. Luther had returned to his own home, but the people had soon noticed his unusual behavior. Even his own family had rejected him. To them, his survival had at first been a miracle, and later an unholy occurrence. Luther had been a fool. Of course, his king knew his human tendencies to calculate. Vampires had followed and attacked him, and he was sure more would raid his hometown. Tears of blood formed in his eyes. He alone had doomed his family. The vampire stopped for a moment to catch his breath. He hadn't fed in a long time, and his body was growing weak. It was growing human. Only that just now, he couldn't afford to be weak. Dawn yielded to the day, and the soft sunbeams burned on his skin. He had loved the sun once. Perhaps it was God's punishment to turn him into a creature of the night. Luther kept panting, but didn't get any better. He felt strangely close to death. The whining of a dog let him snap out of his thoughts about doom and damnation. He wanted to ignore it, yet something drove him to look. Exiting the dense forest, he saw the corpses of wolf and man among the trees and bushes. He could tell they were werewolves from the manner in which they had been slaughtered, although they looked more like large foxes. Had there been another attack? Vampires usually didn't attack during the day. Their skills were inferior to the ones of a wolf at day, and often enough werewolves had a human life cycle, making it easier to surprise them at night. He continued to walk through the carnage. Blood drenched the earth in some places, and the odor of death blocked out the fresh air of the morning. More whining sounded, mingled with growls. Far ahead stood two vampires, throwing stones at the last remaining wolf. Luther could see from their bearing that they only played with their victim to see how long it would last. It was the image of his family that flickered in front of his mind's eye. He hadn't saved them from poverty, and he had killed them by becoming a monster and trying to remain human. Anger rose up inside of him. He didn't know where it came from or what the original cause was. He only knew that he wanted to kill someone. "Nastase!" one of the two called out. Nastase. That was his new name after his rebirth. It was custom to shed his human name together with one's human life. Using his remaining strength, he tore out the heart of the one and the throat of the other vampire. And then he did something that would perplex him later on. Beckoned by the blood around, he feasted on his own kind. It didn't revive him like human blood, but it gave him satisfaction and new strength. He didn't look at the wolf until he had finished. The animal had broken down from several wounds and bruises. He took the wolf into his arms and traveled as far as his strength allowed. Finding a large tree, he rested. He couldn't make a fire. The brightness hurt his eyes and quickly burned his skin in his weak state. Herbs weren't known to him very well, taking from him the chance to help the still unconscious creature next to him. Far away, a few miles, he heard vampires. But they wouldn't find him. He would keep traveling west, mostly at day when vampires slept. Luther backed away a bit when the wolf stirred. Opening its eyes, it stared at him for a long time. Would the animal tear him apart? He was no match for those teeth in his current state. He heard bones snap and saw the hair thinning as the wolf turned into a young woman. Her black hair was long, yet not long enough to conceal much, and he looked away to give her privacy. Taking off his cloak, he gave it to her. The woman took it, still mustering him. She was small, 4, perhaps 5 feet tall, and of slender but muscular build. "Why did you save me?" She finally spoke in a pleasantly human voice. Luther said nothing. "Nastase?" She uttered the name she had heard the vampires use. "Don't," he quickly replied without looking away from the shadows around. The woman at once dragged the cloak tighter around her shoulders at the harsh tone that wasn't meant for her. "Call me Luther," he added in a softer voice. Luther Anastase Nicolaescu, that was him. Not vampire, and not human. "Is my tribe... are they all dead?" The vampire nodded. You fed on your own kind. Again, Luther nodded. What are you? He remained silent for a long time before answering with bitter shame. I am a monster. The woman came a bit closer, raising her hand to touch him. Luther endured the warmth, but kept back the tears that came with it. I am Tlatilpa Ehekato, but I think I want to be Wilpa. Why? For the first time his gaze turned towards the woman. To keep them in my heart. Luther knew what she meant. She was grieving her family just like he was grieving his. He knew at that moment why he had saved her. He never wanted to see his family suffer again. Wilpa was family. Wilpa and Luther sat around a little fire, deep in the black forest. Mortals didn't venture into it too far, because their stories told of fairies and dwarfs living there. Luther kept to the shadows. The fiery glow was too bright for him. You have to hunt, Luther. Wilpa tried to gently change his mind. Properly. No, he answered stubbornly. I won't kill innocents. You can't apply human morals to a Nosferatu. She muttered towards the flames. Luther didn't reply. She was worried about him. Ever since they had met and she had realized how much he had grown to despise himself, she had worried. Her loyalty was the only thing keeping his will to carry on alive. A rustle, distant but too close to his liking, let Luther's vigilance snap awake. A glance towards the werewolf told him that she had heard it as well. There was no one to be found when the vampire followed the noise. Puzzled about his inability to find the cause, he returned. May I join your cozy fire? It was the soft, scraping voice of an old man that sounded right next to his ear. Luther turned, but again, there was no one to be seen. The face of a white fox emerged from next to Wilpa when he was about to sit down again. Instantly he jumped to her side, but his worries were reasonless. The fox gave him a merry glint and retreated a few inches to the side before stepping closer to the fire. He was large, almost larger than Wilpa. His many tails waved in the air behind him. The gold-brown eyes showed no harmful intent, yet Luther remained on his feet. The fire doesn't do you good, the fox spoke softly. You look far too pale near its presence. It's fine, Luther. I don't think he will be any danger. Feeling his weak legs wobble, the vampire returned to the shadows. Feeling strangely at ease with the unknown company, he closed his eyes and sank into a dreamless sleep. He startled awake at the break of dawn, his eyes darting around in search for Wilpa. She is hunting. For you. The fox was lying at the same spot he had taken the night before. The early mists of the morning made him almost invisible. What makes a spirit abandon his home? The vampire asked after his thoughts had cleared. There are many reasons for a spirit to roam. Forest fires are but one of them. Luther could see deep wisdom in the fox's eyes. There was a warmth in his voice Luther had only known from his father and from his grandfather. My name, as I already told Wilpa, is Atsushi no Mori. What drove you to settle around this fire? I like the presence of those two lost souls that won't let go of each other. Wilpa came trotting through the thick green surrounding them, dropping a pheasant into the vampire's lap. The animal was still struggling with its broken wings, causing Luther to hesitate. Wilpa uttered a low growl, telling him to eat lest he wanted to grow even weaker. You think you are unworthy of living because your means of survival are no longer in balance with your ethics. Atsushi spoke from behind Wilpa. It wasn't gleeful or curious, it was absolute. It's wrong to feast on the blood of a living being. For a human it is, but you are no longer human. I should have died a human, Luther growled, fixing the fox with an angry stare. But the spirit had no fear when he looked back with serenity. You are what you are. You were granted a second life. Don't throw it away because your petty beliefs demand it. There is a purpose for everything in this world. Luther looked at Wilper, who still stood there with expectancy. Very well. For you, Wilper. Atsushi's words returned over the course of the day, making the vampire ponder. Purpose. Living in a forest, hunting and sleeping wasn't purpose. He once did have a purpose. To protect his family and build a future for them. Luther was a fighter. But poverty was the only thing a man couldn't fight with a sword. Wealth was the only cure for it. That's what he would do. He would find wealth and find a home for his family. There might be no shortcuts to that, but he was immortal. He had time. He wondered if Wilper would come with them, to search for a home. A real home. You want to stick around? Would you want me to leave? Atsushi spoke without malice. Luther turned away from those knowing eyes, unsure of what to say. He had grown to like the old spirit, even if he didn't always agree with his teachings. We have to do something about your appearance. The vampire had barely spoken the words when someone's finger tapped his shoulder. Turning around, he saw an old Asian man with white hair and a grey beard. He wore similar clothes to Luther. Did you just copy me? I can't use the clothes of my native land here now, can I? He smiled like a fox. But the real question is, will you be able to live amongst them? Luther knew exactly what Atsushi was implying. You can't change what you are. But I can try, Luther retorted stubbornly. Wilper was tugging at his trousers. The wolf was ready to go. As was Luther. Not that they had any close belongings, but the two had needed a bit of time to make up their minds on where to go. In the end, they decided to go somewhere, wherever their legs would carry them. Wilper had told him that her tribe tended to follow the wind. He had argued that the wind had led them to their death, whereupon she replied that it had also led her to her new family. And it had led Atsushi to them. Perhaps following the wind wasn't such a bad choice. They had no responsibilities after all, no home, no life to care about, but they had their freedom. The freedom to follow the wind to greener pastures.